What's up, Internet? Jeff Grettler here, head brand ambassador at Spiceworks. So, as we all know, tech moves at a breakneck, ultra-fast speed, and we're all so focused on looking at the future. Sometimes to see how far you came, you have to go back, look behind you, and look in the past. So today, we're going to be talking to Josh Jones, community manager at Spiceworks. If old tech was music, he'd be a retro rock star. So let's give it a listen right now. Josh, how you doing, man?
Pretty great. How are you?
Doing good, man. Recently, we were just in the community, as we are every day with you being a community manager. And there's just been a lot of stuff that's been posted that I feel like needs to see like the light of day. Like some people, we need a permanent in case you missed it file because the community moves really fast. So you posted recently, we just recently celebrated old stuff day, and you posted something. Old stuff day. You posted something that was really just what I've been calling like the Museum of IT. And as you can see behind you, you're a pretty avid collector of stuff, but it really just got rolling in that post of just like, wow, people really do keep this stuff, because at the time there was an expense to it, right? A charge. But then as time goes on, it became just like really that collector's item of just like however long you've been in IT or using tech. So there's really cool stuff that came up in that post. And I wanted to, go through this today with you and find some of those posts.
Yeah.
Was there any that really jumped out at you?
I mean, there's a ton in here that I thought was super interesting. I mean, we've got everything from typewriters to telephones. One that I thought was super cool. Daily Llama posted about the Dragon 32 computer, which I had never heard of.
I haven't. What is that? I've never heard of that.
So it was apparently bigger in Europe than it was over here. So that might be why we hadn't heard of it. But it was. It sounds. I did a little bit of research on it. It sounds like it was pretty equivalent to. It was the TRS-80. The TRS-80 came out in '82, but apparently the U.S. distributor, when they went out of business, they sold all their stock to a third party. You could apparently still buy them new in box until 2017.
Are you?
Which, if I had known about that, I would have super been on board.
I totally would have grabbed some. 1982. Yeah. That was like, I mean. It doesn't feel like it's that long ago, but obviously it was long ago because E.T. was topping the box office in 1982, and E.T. also has a special place in retro tech, right? That E.T. the Atari cartridge,
it's just behind my shoulder there, boxed copy.
Yeah,
E.T. for the Atari,
and there was the Game Over documentary showed about digging that up, but. What are you talking about digging about up? There's people like you that would still actively play that. Like Pass Rusher in the community is actually actively playing it, where he promised us we're going to do a live stream where we can actually watch him play the ET game because it lives in. It became so infamous that now it's lovable again. We're to the point where we wish it was lovable when it came out like that.
Yeah, there's still the price sticker on the box there. It looks like I think it was $267 they paid for it.
Oh wow!
Sorry, $247.
$247.
Yeah.
It's got to be worth now. Like on the secondhand market now, obviously you could probably make your money back.
Oh yeah,
but you're not going to part with that. No way.
No, that actually comes from my my SO's grandparents' estate. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
you got some sentimental value as well.
You got to keep that. What were some of the other replies in there that you really caught your eye?
I mean, we have the cool clocks that were in here. We had people talking about the Zune and some creative MP3 player. So much fun stuff in here. One thing that I did really enjoy, though, just because I happen to have a connection to it, we had somebody, let me see if I can find the post here. Jonathan Johnson actually mentioned Edison cylinder phonographs. So that it was a wax cylinder. I have a slight evolution of that from 1925.
Wow.
This is an Edison Blue Amberol
That's incredible.
well, wax
Literally,
cylinder.
so literally over 100, like right at almost 100 years old, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So these, they're fun. So, a record spins this way. These spin this way. And then the reed head just kind of moves across it as it plays the song. Um,
Something
but
that would see Montgomery Burns would be playing right to woo a lady. You know what? 1925. That's the Phantom of the Opera was topped the box office at that time. I mean, that's
Oops.
hard to believe. We're talking 100 years, but yeah, that is the legit 1925 download.
yeah,
There's your
yeah,
MP3 file.
I was sad when I first found this at a thrift store. The wax cylinder, the plaster of Paris core inside of these, whenever it freezes or gets too much moisture in it, they expand. And unfortunately, this one has been cracked. So I don't know that it will still play, but I don't have a player for it anyway.
You've already.
But I was sad that I couldn't find a recording of it online. But since then, I've actually found two different people that have this same song. This is the Too Much Mustard One Step by the National Promenade Band. I found that there's been an effort to archive these, and somebody has actually recorded two different cylinders of this song.
They're doing the Lord's work right there.
Yeah.
Too much mustard. That is good. That sounds like a current band name. But I guess that's where that saying "put a little mustard on it," right? Put a little, or like what we say here, put a little spice on it. Same deal.
Yeah.
No, this was a really great post, and judging obviously, if you see your personal museum right there, you are clearly an avid collector. How did you get into? Did you fall into collecting and just realize you're all this cool stuff, or is it something that you set out to do?
It's a lot of it just kind of happened. I find I love learning new stuff, especially from people that are excited about it, and finding objects that have a physical connection to the technology that we work with every day is just it's something that really hits me in a certain spot, and I just really enjoy it. My collection actually started with IBM ThinkPads. So before they sold their business, their consumer business to Lenovo, IBM used to make the ThinkPad line.
Right.
And so those machines are, I mean, they're super tough. There's a reason there's so many of them still around, but there was just something about those that was like very tactile, and I loved using those machines. So I started collecting those when I was younger. And then, unfortunately, long story that we won't get into today, but that collection, unfortunately, I no longer have. But that led into me collecting some other things to sort of fill that void. And as I, learn new things, develop new hobbies, the collection expands and grows.
So the Lenovo sacrificed itself for you to save many others. So, I mean, again, I can stare at this background forever. It's so fascinating to see it. You want to go through and check out some of these items that you want to highlight today?
It's stuff in the background. I've got, obviously, we've got the Tandy machine down here that I highlighted in the post. Playing some Oregon Trail on there right now.
Perfect.
We've got the Atari 2600 just to the side of it that you can't see because the keyboard's in the way.
With both joysticks still present or just one?
Oh, yeah.
Both joysticks. And it's still playable, right? There's no way this stuff was built to last. There's nothing that would have ever stopped it. Like, I think newer tech becomes a lot more pluck and chuck, but back then when they were buying that and you were dropping some bills to get that, they built that thing to last, to keep playing forever.
Yeah, and even when things do break, obviously, the capacitor plague was an issue for decades, but you can just buy components. If any of the chips fail on that, you can just buy a new one, grab a soldering iron, you can have it fixed in 15 minutes.
That's unreal. What is the capacitor plague?
Oh, so that for anyone who isn't familiar, for a good while, I want to say it was like 15 years or so, there were a lot of manufacturers that were using cheap capacitors. So an electrolytic capacitor is one of those big components, like one of the big cylinders that you'll see on PCBs all the time. Those actually have like an oil inside of them. And for a while, they were using cheap capacitors that either would degrade or just kind of malfunction for some reason. And they would leak all of that oil onto boards. So not only would they not have the correct capacitance anymore, that oil was also corrosive and it would damage the components around them.
Oh, so it had the enzyme that bananas have, right? So it's not only can they just rot themselves, they're going to rot anything that's in arm's length.
Yeah. So it's people that are trying to archive anything from that era, especially the first thing you want to do with an electronic from any time that you're not sure of the age of a capacitor like that, you want to just replace it. Thankfully, they're pretty cheap, but it's
like where do you go? Do you have a couple of sites that you go to that are your go-to for replacements or parts? Or
I mean, there's tons of different places for a lot of it. I mean, iFixit's great if it's new enough to be on there. But yeah, a lot of times it's just most of them are their standard part numbers. Resistors, capacitors, anything like that is going to be a pretty standardized thing you can grab from anywhere. Pick it up on Amazon, pick it up on AliExpress.
Oh man, remember the days when you say instead of pick it up at Amazon, you would just run to Radio Shack?
Run to Radio Shack, yeah. Yeah, I wish I still had a Radio Shack. That would be great.
Oh man, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you do have a Radio Shack behind you. I don't know if you know that. Or not. I don't know if you know that or not. But what other items that you got floating around there that you can highlight for us?
I've got all kinds of stuff. I mean, I've got processors here. This is the first gaming processor I ever bought. Got an old Pentium. And speaking of Pentiums, in the thread, there was a picture of a Pentium 2. Let me see if I can scroll down and find that. That was Tom 6018. So in his second picture, there's a big Pentium 2 box on the right-hand side of the picture. So the Pentium 2 was actually a cartridge processor. So, we're used to CPUs that look like these guys.
Right.
They're just a little square. The Pentium 2 was a cartridge design that had a big old heatsink.
I remember that.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find my Pentium 2 for this, but I was able to find something else that is cartridge-based that you might enjoy. I have a WinTendo. So this...
What is a WinTendo?
This is a Nintendo Entertainment System that I've put a little sticker over the Nin10 part because it runs Windows 10.
So you literally took a Nintendo box and loaded Windows 10 on there.
I did cheat a little bit. If you look at the back, those are not the standard connections. The Nintendo did not come with HDMI in, what was that, 1985, I think?
Yeah, it was 85, yeah. That's not cheating. That is art. Like that you were able to actually get that on there. Again, I guess I'm trying to get into the mind of an artist in a sense. What made you look at a Nintendo and say, I want to load Windows 10 on that. I think it'll run.
One of those hobbies that I dove into, mini computers have been fascinating, especially over the past 5-10 years. They've gotten so good. You can, I mean, heck. So I've got here, this is a 32-bit computer for $5 that has more computing power than supercomputers had a few decades ago.
That's unreal.
For a couple $100, you can buy a machine that can legitimately play games that aren't that old. And so I love the idea of taking a box that has so much nostalgia in it, like the Nintendo. I've got something similar that's a PlayStation in the basement. Taking a box that has that gaming nostalgia and bringing it into the new the new era of computing. I can play much newer games, but realistically, if I'm playing that, I'm probably playing a Nintendo game.
Right. Which we all know are way harder.
Yeah.
They're definitely way harder. But that was what's the retro game that was considered the hardest game in history? Was it the Karate Kid?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't dug down that particular rabbit hole.
Yeah, I feel like one of the early game influencers, Angry Video Game Nerd, wasn't he basically born on the breath of just explaining how hard the Karate Kid game was?
And that's pretty cool.
There's a lot of crossover games that people forgot that were based on movies. Like now it's pretty standard. Well, actually, I would say it's beyond standard because the video game itself is the movie and it's working in the reverse direction. Like you have this great game, let's make it into a movie. But back then, there was a lot like E.T. that was just like, this is a cool movie. Let's see if we can make a game. You have that. You have Karate Kid, Friday the 13th, one of my favorites on there, which is also on the Nintendo. That was super hard, like really hard. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And that, again, that doesn't feel like that long ago, but I guess it was. I guess it was.
I mean, you say it doesn't feel that long ago. Most of this stuff, honestly, is some of. We showed off the Nintendo from '85, the Commodore 64. A lot of this actually came out before I was born. Not to make you feel old.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess you could say, I do remember a lot of this stuff coming out new. I remember the format wars. When you think of format wars of just like VHS and beta, I remember that format war, but I also remember the format gaming war, which was Atari versus Intellivision, right? Were you focusing on the joystick or were you focusing on the disc? And you're like, well, you realize with the Intellivision, you can press 1-9 at the same time and you can pause it. And I think there is like an appreciation for this stuff now, because it was only like 5 years ago where Nintendo released their throwback tiny little Nintendo with like all the games baked in, and those things were like sold out quickly. They were very difficult to grab. And then the next year they came out with the Super Nintendo version, which I instantly bought both of them, and I still have them hooked up to my TV to play. But like, it's great, and it reminds, but there's still something where you like, I have the original and it's still playable, like you do. I mean, that's great. But you were saying it's awesome. Like you were playing Oregon Trail last night.
Yeah, that's what's my hand doesn't work. That's what's playing on the TV there. That's the CRT.
That's crazy. Do you like? How does your current IT collection match up to your retro IT collection? Like, are you still kind of focusing on past tech, or you still collect all tech?
It's definitely a little bit of everything. I would say my retro collection has a little bit more, just because time keeps moving forward for some reason.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I love all tech. I mean, I just built a new gaming computer last week. I've got well, I don't have the current generation of consoles just because I don't really game that much anymore. But I mostly keep up with getting all the different consoles, all of the different game systems, and I've got stacks of computer parts that I really don't need just because it's fun to play with them.
Yeah, I actually posted something in there myself, other than my the Texas Instrument Classic, The Little Professor, right? But I also posted a while ago on Control Alt Tech, we actually had Matt Malone, the dumpster diver. So I had the privilege or the terrifying experience of dumpster diving with him after dark. And we recorded that, and that was great. But I found this thing right here, I'll show you, that it was a circuit board that looked like a face. But for many years, I had this on my desk, and I had no idea what it was. So I posted that in your post, and next thing you know, we started getting a reply, and we actually tracked down what it was. And it ended up, it was the circuit board to control, basically a controller for a UPS. And I'm like, oh, really? It was on the set of Control Tech because I just thought it looked like a face. But yeah, we're actually, I mean, I guess just once you're a tech enthusiast, you're going to appreciate all aspects of it, past, present, and future. But yeah, I thought that was cool. We actually worked that out. Let's talk a little bit about storage, like the evolution of storage. Like I know you got some floppies right there, right? Don't you?
Yep. Yeah, I've got, so we'll start with the oldest first. I unfortunately don't have an 8.5-inch floppy, but I do have some 5 1/4.
Wow. And that's the size,
there's
right?
a reason why they're called floppy.
Yeah, that's the name where it came from, right?
Yeah.
And that's that 5 1/4. That's actually represents how big it is, like how much you can store on there.
So the 5 1/4, that's actually the size of the drive that read these.
Oh, okay.
So the storage size, these are, so this one is a double-sided high density. So it's a 1.2 meg. The earlier ones were a little less, but
1.2 meg. Just wrap your brain of that's literally all you can. What can you fit on there that 1 meg now? Just like a large text file, singular.
Not even large. I mean, I've got log files from my previous job that are nearly a gigabyte. But
And then that was the evolution, and then we evolved into the standard floppy that everybody knows and loves. Yeah, those guys.
So this isn't quite the one everyone knows and loves. That they look the same, but this one is a 720 kilobyte floppy.
That's so that's K. We're not even in the meg. You're in the Ks.
But it is smaller.
It's smaller, but you can fit, and but you can't fit as much.
Yep. Then the one that people are more familiar with, these are 1.44 meg, so a little bit more space than the big guy.
Yeah, that's the Mac Daddy of all floppies. Everyone knows that meg, because that was the standard forever, right? Like throughout the 90s, it's just like you had that floppy before, and I remember when iOmega had their zips, and then like you realize, there it is right there. Like you realize that now you can fit 100 times worth of data on this than you can on your standard floppy. And then I was like, why don't they just build these into your towers?
It's kind of, it was just bad timing on their part, but yeah. I do wonder what a world looks like where the zip drive caught on a little bit earlier. I mean, I grew up in a pretty rural area, so we honestly at my high school we were still using these 1.4 meg floppies well into the. I remember 2008 we were still using them.
It's pretty wild. I mean, they're definitely the one that's they won the format war, and that they are the VHS of data storage without a doubt. That now they're hold a place near and dear because of the nostalgia feel for it. And you can run around in a movie, and there could be just like we have this very important data, and it was on a floppy, and then you move to the jump sticks, and now I think you can get. What, 4 terabyte on something about that, like smaller than that size, and that's SSD, right? It's not even it's solid state storage that you can get. It's
I've normally hooked up to the WinTendo. I've got a little NVMe to USB converter that I've just got a 4 terabyte drive in that runs. It will max out the USB 3 bandwidth.
Oh wow,
it's insane.
So. I gotta go back to the WinTendo because now you got my brain percolating like what. So what are the games in there stored locally, right? So there's no cartridge slot. Like you don't have to boot up the WinTendo by going right. You don't have to. That's not how you boot it up. You just turn it on and it runs.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't managed to wire up a cartridge slot to it yet, though that is on my to-do list. But no, I've got a cartridge ripping device that I basically just plug the cartridge into it. It backs everything up that's on that. It just gives me a ROM file, and then I can just throw that onto the WinTendo and play it.
Oh wow! So you emulate basically that cartridge experience. Do you have a rough estimate of how many games that you have stored on there?
I don't actually have that many physical cartridges for it, unfortunately. So I think I only have like 20 games on there right now. But
You
if
know,
I wanted
realize
to,
20 games back in the day was like a lot. Like you're going to someone's house because they got
yeah,
20 games. So it's not like that's not a small quantity, but in any stretch.
yeah. But what I was about to say, if I wanted to, I forget exactly how big it is, but the entire, like every game that was ever released for the original Nintendo, I want to say you can fit on, it's some ridiculously small amount of space.
Which I'm really surprised that they just haven't, like when that retro box came out, I think it was something along the lines of 30 games. Where,
Yeah.
like, if you get in it, I know that, and they probably have something to do with production and how cheap it is, but like, why didn't you just store like all the games?
I assume that that's mostly down to licensing.
Yeah, probably. I'm sure the licensing was all over the board back then, right? I know with Mattel and Atari, some of the other classic ones, like you had their original line, but then it got to the point where licensing, and then you'd start getting other lines in there, and had to capture that. Like I remember, everyone thinks of Donkey Kong, right, as like the granddaddy of all, but like in Intellivision, we played something called Beauty and the Beast, which was basically the ripoff of Donkey Kong, where you're climbing this, but you were climbing you can only climb open windows to there, and it's just like, I know that had a lot to do with, I'm sure copyright issues and licensing issues, but that you can resolve now. Do you have a favorite game that you currently play?
Favorite game for the Nintendo, it has to be just Super Mario Bros. 3.
The
Um,
class, yeah, the class, yeah, the standard bearer, right? Everyone thinks of when
yeah,
you think of that super, because that, I remember that just like opened your mind to a whole new world. Like, look at this, we didn't know what it was. It's like the world just never ends. This with the side scroller, it just seemed like the world was just like infinite. It really did take you out of that very contained 4x3 experience and just realize that the world can just keep going. I,
oh,
like I said, I have the retro box, and I started playing a lot of the games that I didn't play a lot back then, like Balloon Blast, I believe one of it was, and Ice Climber, Dr. Mario, which was their Tetris. I find like if you need a brain break while you're at work, I just turn to that TV, switch the input, and I'm just like, it's not a full commitment of like playing like a modern game where you're going to be immersed, but it's just something to like pass the time. Where now, like I know a lot of modern games, they build in on these load screens, they'll put in a lot of those basic games to kind of pass the time as they're loading the real stuff.
you need a game inside of your game.
Yeah, right. And I mean, yeah, we can get into quantum physics of like we're building games and games, and that's real life, and we're playing The Sims, but there's games within that games. Let's talk a little bit about the future retro stuff, right? Like we didn't know what was going to be cool to collect then, and now we took it for granted. Like right now, I'm holding on to like one of the returned Netflix discs because I feel like it's just like that in itself offers like a certain level of nostalgia. But a lot of the stuff that we would have been really cool, we just recycled, removed, got rid of. What's some of the stuff in 2025 in current tech that you feel like in 20 years is going to be like, I think this is going to be really cool to hold on to? Because I think we're more cognizant of it right now, right? Like when we were growing up,
Yeah.
we bought action figures, we take them out, right? They're action figures. They need to see action. Where you should have been like, we should have bought two and held on to one. And I think a lot of collectors are a little more cognizant of future proofing their collection. So what do you think is going to be in 20 years? They're going to be like, this is going to be something cool to hold on to.
I think because people are so much more aware of it, any of the stuff, any of the obvious choices are already going to be things that are preserved and, well kept. So to me, I think the things that are going to be more interesting, the just physical representations of the digital world. So like the Blu-rays.
Yeah.
I mean, I just saw an article pretty recently that they're shutting down a lot of the production of Blu-rays and physical media, and just sort of the last remnants of the physical nature of media. I think is going to be really interesting.
Well, yeah, I
We
mean,
are,
I was actually just reading on social media. I didn't, I don't know where I saw this. It was just like there was people that are pretty still angry at Best Buy, even as a business. But even though as a business they're struggling, right? It's a physical business, but like, how dare you get rid of your physical media? That's going to be like the death of you. Like it's almost like a hex on your house to do that. But I think after 2020, when we just got everything streaming and delivered, there's a really a big push now to not only physical media, collect not the VHS and the Laserdisc, but actually Blu-rays and high definition DVDs. I think a lot of people are holding on to that because they realize that it's just like this is something that I can still hold in my hand and somebody can't control, because you can have a whole digital library of stuff, but you're still relying on somebody else. You're at the mercy of somebody else's good graces to continue to stream this stuff. But like the physical stuff is still just yours.
yeah. And it definitely feels like we're losing a lot more of that as time goes on. But I do think there's going to be a lot of value in the physical aspects of it like that.
Yeah, I have an absurd amount of USB storage sticks, jump drives, whatever you want to call it. I have a lot, and a lot of them came like lanyards, so they're all hanging from these different strings, and they're different shapes and different sizes. And I got a couple, like I think I have like a Pokemon one, like the ones that are still pretty. I think a lot of those are pretty stylish, and you're gonna have the regular ones, and I think in 20 years they're like, look at this, and like this only stored 1 gig.
Or if you're really lucky, there's some that store like 256 megs, something like that.
Yeah, and in that size, right? I always think of, like, you realize you have the technology you have just in your mobile device alone is just like back then, that's what they put a man on the moon with. And now you just kind of carry it in your pocket. So, and then I think TVs are always a big indicator of the test of time, of bookmarks in time, where you just like, you had the ones that were like tables, and then you moved to like the plasmas, which were still kind of flat-ish, but now you just get like the super flatties. They're like, that's also just a picture, and it's just like, or it's like a razor thin. So I think people might still, I'm starting to notice like it's even hard to give away old TVs and just like, oh, what is that? And it's just like, oh, it's high def, and how many HDMIs does it have on it? Where before you would have been like, yes, give me that one. So I think TVs are a big indicator, and obviously within IT, monitors, what goes along those lines of just like, because you're not really, there's not people using like a virtual projectors yet as monitors, right? Because they're still, those are expensive light bulbs. But like, think of the evolution of the CRT to the LCD when it was monitors. Like, I remember starting to give out the first LCDs and replacing CRTs, which are really, really heavy. Really, really heavy. So I think any kind of those display monitors, you got one there.
If you're lucky, you can get a small CRT, and it only weighs a few pounds. Oh, sorry, it's behind my microphone.
Yeah, there you go. That looks great. Now you got me thinking. I'm going to think, and I'll add this in post if I can find it. I had something that was basically a TV that was in your pocket, right? And it was just like, it was about this big, and you just flipped it up, and it had an antenna, like a radio antenna, and you can pick up stuff on
big
the
antenna.
air. Yeah, I got to find that now. I literally just thought of that. If I can find that, I'm going to do it. Because again, I want to make this like, I think you should be our curator, our librarian, if you will, of like old tech. Because, my goal, I've been told you, we're going to be doing this at SpiceWorld. And we should do it at SpiceWorld every year. Because I think it would bring collectors out of the woodwork to like just show this event. So, join us in November, where, mark my words, we are going to have that Museum of IT curated by you, Josh Jones. I think that's the way to go. So my final note for you, obviously, before also not just be the librarian, curator of our Museum of IT, you should consider some wood paneling, like you're in a basement, for our Museum of IT. I want it to look like a basement, because everyone's like, when you think of like the 80s, that you think of just like, oh, look at all these neon colors, and they probably had cool chairs. Like, no, everything was brown and wood.
Yeah, I was thinking that stereotypical 70s wood paneling that all of the houses around here are made out of.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we need to do. And there's just like that off-green olive-colored couch. And sometimes if you went to your friends that had a fancy one, there would be like plastic covering over it. So like your legs, when you're playing a vicious game on Atari, your legs might be sweating and sticking to this plastic. That's what the Museum of IT needs to encompass. What did I tell you? That is a Museum of IT. And you can find Josh and myself and other awesome IT professionals just like that, community.spiceworks.com. So come in, join us, chat about tech. That's it for us today. Don't forget to tech yourself before you wreck yourself. We'll see you next time.